Yorkshire needs your urine, and we're willing to pay for it. It sounds like a joke, right? But this was reality. Literal boatloads of human urine were being shipped to this incredible coastline to supply a massive local industry. Until one day, when it all just stopped. And I don't know about you, but I've got a lot of questions. So we're about to head back inland here to the very place where these pungent packages were being delivered to. We'll take a look at what's left and try and figure out why they needed so much of this liquid gold. So let's go and take a look. Now this is the kind of story where it's tricky to know where to start. So many questions, and actually so many branches and threads to it as well. It's got religious connections, connections to the Pope, global economic battles, war, power struggles, and yeah, I wasn't joking, human pee. So I guess we may as well start with, well, what were they making here? What were they producing on the Yorkshire coast? Well, we're heading to the remains of a place called Peak Alum Works, and alum is the key word, A-L-U-M. The industry here on the Yorkshire coast ran from the mid-1600s to the late 1800s, but alum was heavily in demand before this as well. And it had a few uses, but one of its primary ones came down to one thing: clothing. Now back then, and I suppose this might apply at any period in history or present day, for example, but the wealthy and the elite had a particular interest in wearing bright, colourful clothing. And whilst we do have a long history of textiles production in Britain, there was something on the other side of the equation that we didn't quite have down yet, and that's dyes. A surprisingly complex part of the process when I started looking into it. Oh, we got the sheep mafia. I'll go around. Sorry, sheep. Now there was one major problem with a lot of the dyes available at this time, and it was that they wouldn't bind to the fabric, to the material. If you take vegetable dyes and wool, for example, you can apply them and then they just won't last. They'll wash out. And that's where alum comes in. It's something known more formally as a mordant. And it basically helps to bind the dye to the fabric, the material, so that it can last for a long time. And not only was it heavily in demand, but we didn't have any way of producing it here in Britain for a long time. Leading up to the emergence of the alum industry here in North Yorkshire, we'd been importing our alum from places like modern-day Turkey and Italy. Italy in particular was very key in this industry. In fact, they had a monopoly, the papal monopoly. That's right, the Pope was involved, and it was by all accounts very profitable. And not only that, but they played by some very aggressive business practices. But there was trouble on the horizon. Bad news for them, good news for us, I suppose. We've got religious reformation. We've got religious reformation that was brewing. Henry VIII, who famously dissolved the monasteries and took back some power for himself. And so it left us looking for a way to produce alum here on British shores. It was initially attempted in a few different parts of the country, but it was here on the Yorkshire coast that looked like a prime spot, particularly because all of the material on the coastline here was very rich in key minerals. And so this was identified as the place. It gave us most of what we needed, but there was one missing ingredient that would prove to be a little unique. And you guessed it, this is where the human urine comes in, because this process required, or could be completed, with ammonia. Now, aside from the actual production process of the alum, which is actually quite complex, it takes several months, sometimes over a year. But at this point, once this knowledge was out there, we had everything we needed. And the alum business here on the Yorkshire coast started to grow. Things started small here, and initially they were collecting urine from local farmhouses. There'd be barrels left for filling that would be collected and brought to the alum works, and things were running smoothly. But over time, the industry was growing and they needed more. And this is where things ramped up quite a lot, because they started importing urine from bigger cities, places like Hull, Newcastle, and primarily London. At its peak, it said that they were bringing here, shipping along the coast, 200 tons of human urine, winching it up the coastline to transport it to the alum works. And if you're wondering more specifically why, what was the urine doing in this process? Well, alum is a colourless crystal. And towards the end of the process, the ammonia in the urine would play its part in drawing out unwanted chemicals and reducing the acidity, allowing eventually the alum to crystallise. And a lot more questions popped up for me when I was reading about this industry in its peak. Because 200 tonnes, that sounds like a lot. According to the records, buckets were placed on street corners in the likes of London. Wooden tubs were being filled with urine, and I even found one record that claimed that Yorkshiremen would travel down to London once a week to collect these huge wooden tubs, bring them here, and then they'd eventually be returned to London full of Yorkshire butter. Now, I haven't managed to trace that all the way back to its source, so I don't know if that's true or not. It sounds a little bit wild, but who knows? Stranger things have happened. And as I mentioned in the intro, it is true. People were getting paid to pee. By all accounts, this was, if you'll forgive the bad joke, a golden era. Paid for your bodily functions. Sounds incredible. I mean, the reality was probably very much not that. And annoyingly, frustratingly, the one detail that I couldn't find any reference of was a number about what people were being paid. I couldn't find a single figure. So if anybody out there has an idea, well, please let us know. Now, of course, the unfortunate truth is that all good things must come to an end. And this human urine microeconomy was no different. Having said that, I think some people didn't get the memo, because every time I walk past my local on a Friday night, there's always some guy in the alleyway peeing into a plant pot. The nail in the coffin for the alum industry here on the Yorkshire coast was essentially technological advancements. People devised new ways, more efficient ways to manufacture alum synthetically. And so, for better or worse, the various alum works on the Yorkshire coast here closed down. And I think I can see, in the near distance, the last remains of Peak Alum Works. Let's go take a look. Here we go. The remains of Peak Alum Works. Now, all the remains that we see here today are what was left here primarily from the 1800s. And as you can see, well, it's not an insubstantial size. One of the other parts of the process, aside from shipping and winching and then transporting all the urine here, would have been to quarry the shale from the coastline. I'm not too sure what's going on here. I did a lot of research on the site, but I never saw these. And before the ammonia was needed, the quarried shale would be burnt for a very long time. Got some drainage here as well. And when I say it's a complex process, I mean it. I would happily go into it in detail, but it would just take too long in this video. It remains of a window here. Or at least it looks like a window, just with a load of earth on the other side. Is there anything around there? It looks a bit dark from here. I wasn't expecting to need a torch on a day like today, but here we are. Oh, don't tell me the battery's gone. No. Rookie mistake. It's going to have to be the phone torch. I can't really see the screen from there, so hopefully you could see something. Now, something funny about this place is that these days you can actually stay here. One of the workers, I think it's the Alum Works manager's house, you might be able to see just up there, is now a rentable holiday cottage. I would imagine, given the scenery here, it might come at a bit of a price. I haven't checked, but it's a pretty amazing place to stay. And I'm happy to report that it smells crystal clear. There is not a whiff of urine. Well, not yet anyway. Obviously, before I leave, I will be paying tribute to the history of this place by urinating on the brickwork. I'm joking, of course. There's quite a lot left here, though. Quite a lot remains. One thing I don't know much about is sort of like construction techniques from this period. So I don't know what all of these marks are for. Would these stones have been used to sharpen some tools? I presume not, because these are covered in them as well. I'm sure somebody out there must know. Plenty of brickwork left here too. One other funny detail I came across in all of this as well was that in terms of the quality of the stuff, apparently typically the urine of the working class and the poor was of higher quality when it came to alum manufacturing than the wealthy. And that's believed to be because the poor couldn't afford to drink as much as the wealthy. And so the ammonia levels were higher than that of those who were drinking a lot. On top of that, the longer you leave it, in other words, the staler it becomes, the higher the ammonia levels. And so in the context of this place, the better the quality. And so all in all, the whole process, the collection, well, the depositing, the collection, the transportation, and then the manufacturing, must have been a little bit of a disgusting process. But we are talking about the 16 and 1700s. Probably a few things from back then that we might find a little bit disgusting. Now just uphill from that first area, there's not as much left here, but we can still see some of the remains. And you have to use your imagination a little bit based on the diagram, courtesy of the National Trust. But you can see that it was a pretty big operation. Lots of small artifacts, and these days just home to nature. And you can probably hear there's a lot of nature around us. Oh, here we go. So they had an inclined railway that would transport materials all the way up the coast. And just in case anybody thought I was making it up, 3,500 tonnes of coal from Durham, 400 tonnes of seaweed, and 200 tonnes of urine from the ports of Newcastle, Hull, and London. So I wasn't lying. And this is the remains of the top section of that railway. Massive operation, absolutely massive. And I think the only other bits left are just these walls here, bits of foundation. This looks pretty new. Somebody left a body in there. Let's not interfere. Oh, fireplace as well. You could rebuild this into a little home. Now that puts us, I think, pretty much on the edge of the site of the old alum works. We'll head back down to where we started, and then for anyone curious about how to visit and what else is around here, I'll let you know what the score is. If you're interested in visiting either Peak Alum Works or the Yorkshire coast, well, I mean, look at that. Why wouldn't you want to? There are so many things to visit around here. I don't work for the tourist board, but there's a ton. We're kind of roughly just about maybe equidistant between Scarborough and Whitby right here. Robin Hood's Bay is just to the north, and there are a lot of well-maintained footpaths around here. You do need to watch out a little bit, particularly with the coastal paths. But even so, there are a ton of options when it comes to visiting, with various levels of accessibility. And if you're a wheelchair user, there's a bit of a sloped hill that comes down here on the footpath. So I guess it depends what kind of equipment you've got as to whether that's going to be suitable. And the closest car parks from here are about 20 minutes, I believe, in a place called Ravenscar. So loads of options, and if you ever get the chance to visit the area, I would highly recommend it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this story. Please do consider subscribing if you haven't done already. Hyping is a huge help as well. I'm going to just sit and soak in the view for a little bit before I go home, and fingers crossed, I'll see you on the next one.